Made possible through support from ARC Thrift Stores, Developmental Pathways, Dungarvan, and the Arc of Aurora.
A THINK+change training.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in for our newest Pod VOD installment with the Arc of Aurora and THINK+change. I am an individual and systems advocate here. I'm Petrie Burrill, and I am joined today by the wildly brilliant Hillary Jorgensen, who is the co-executive director of Colorado Cross Disability Coalition. Hillary, you have lived in this space for a very long time. So why don't you share with us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and also, I think maybe for people who are tuning in, if you can kind of define what public policy and policy advocacy is. I just threw a lot at you. Sorry.
Yes, no, that's okay. Absolutely. Hi. Thanks for having me. So, as you mentioned, I'm the co-executive director of the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition, the statewide advocacy organization run by people with disabilities, for people with disabilities, and we look at both the individual and systems level to make people with disabilities lives better.
Yeah. And you do.
And yes, thank you. And as you mentioned, I've been in this space for a long time. I've only been at CCEC about 2 years, but my entire career has been spent in the advocacy and nonprofit space. I was born with my disability. I have a very rare syndrome, which is a form of autism. Mm-hmm. I like to tell people I am actually literally 1 in a million. That's how rare my syndrome is. And I grew up in a very small town in rural Colorado. And that meant that I did not have a lot of exposure to other people with disabilities. And certainly my type of disability, because you're so rare. Mm-hmm. I was on a joke before I met anyone with my syndrome.
Wow.
But I think when you grow up being different from the people around you, you just have a eye for injustice.
Yeah.
And, I think I noticed and realized that the world isn't fair a lot earlier than a lot of my peers. Mm-hmm. And so, from a very young age, I kind of just knew this was something that I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily disability advocacy specifically, but advocacy in general.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I ended up here.
So, I mean, once you realized that advocacy was your avenue, what then, because you live and work in the mm-hmm. disability space, what eventually kind of drove you into that world and specifically into policy?
Yes, I also forgot your question about defining public policy.
Oh, that's all right. You can go back.
Yeah, so I knew that a lot of things in my life were not fair. I knew once I started becoming more aware of disability culture and history and started meeting other people with disabilities, I actually was part of a conference through the National Youth Leadership Network, which sadly doesn't exist anymore, but they were leadership programs for young people with disabilities, mm-hmm. and so kind of through being involved with them, meeting other people with disabilities my age, just realizing the world wasn't, built for us. I was like, this is what I want to do. I did my undergrad, and then I thought really long and hard about the skills and talents that I have and how I could best use them. And also knowing that as someone with a disability, probably not going to need an advanced degree. You're not going to be qualified. And you're able-bodied peers. I decided to go to law school. And so I went to law school, went to look for the PNA in Washington State for a little while, and then decided to come home. But my entire career actually hasn't been in disability advocacy. I had a stint like in general social justice and health policy things, and I actually think that made me a better advocate.
That's where you cut your chops.
Yeah, and frankly, I think it was good for me to be in rooms where I'm often the only disabled person.
Right.
But also learning from people doing different kinds of advocacy, I really learned a lot that I have then been able to take into my specific disability advocacy. And so I've been doing health policy advocacy for a while, and this opportunity at CCEC came up, and it kind of felt like coming home.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So,
almost full circle.
Totally full circle. And I'm really glad I made the move. It feels really great. I also am really thankful for the experience I had at other non-disability specific organizations.
Yeah.
In terms of defining public policy, so I think public policy is just a very fancy way of saying the laws and the rules that are made that impact our everyday lives.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what public policy is.
Yeah, that's a really, very specific way to just generalize how it affects our lives all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And no matter who we are, whether we have a disability or not, our entire lives are shaped by policy, whether we know it or not.
Yeah.
From the streets that we use to get to work,
right,
to the programs that we depend on to live independently, to the safety of the food in our grocery stores, everything.
Yeah.
The quality of our air.
Yeah. Share with us, if you will, maybe one of your favorite or most consequential policy that you've seen passed in recent times that has, really made a positive impact on the disability community.
Yeah, I was thinking about this on the way earlier because we have, as a community, done so much work in the last decade that has been life-changing for people that picking just one thing.
I'm sure, yes.
But I really want to lift up the Medicaid buy-in for people with disabilities. For people who may not know, prior to the buy-in, people who were on Medicaid either had to really limit their look or couldn't look at all because there was and still is certain people, people who can't look at $2,000 asset limit, which is really limiting in so many ways, and it's keeping our community in poverty. And so advocates got together and decided to push for a Medicaid buy-in for working people with disabilities. And we were able to pass it. And because of that, if you can look even a little bit, it doesn't have to be full time, you can keep your assets and your Medicaid. And that has been life-changing for so many people. And I think the next phase of that look is either raising eliminating completely the asset limit for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm really happy that people who want to look and can look are free of that asset limit and that burden of poverty. But for people who can't look, we shouldn't be punishing them with a $2,000 asset limit.
Right.
I mean, property taxes have gone up in Colorado a lot, and we actually at CCEC are starting to see cases where people who have been in their homes forever and are on Medicaid but can't look for whatever reason cannot save up enough to pay their taxes because they're more than the $2,000 asset limit. And we are just living in a universe where $2,000 is nothing for savings.
No. So something like that, this example that you gave with the Medicaid buy-in, how do policies like that get created? How are they born? How do they come about?
Yes. So in my experience, every policy, or almost every policy, starts with a really passionate group of people that are experiencing a problem in their lives. So in the example I gave, people wanted to look and they couldn't look because of the asset limit. So people got together and said, is this a problem for you? Yeah, it's a problem for me. And then, okay, how can we fix it? And that really, in my experience, is the basis for every single policy change, whether it's, getting the city council to add another stop sign in your neighborhood, or all the way up to federal policy change like the Affordable Care Act. It has to start with people who care, and I think the best policy comes from people who are directly experiencing the problem that they want to fix.
Yeah. So on that note, you and I both know that lived experience is incredibly important.
Yeah.
That's how change comes about. Why do you think that people with disabilities are so underrepresented in our government?
I think there are a lot of reasons. I think the first is this whole conversation we've been having about look. The Medicaid buy-in hasn't been around that long, and so there are not that many of us who have been able to look for that long. I also think that the barriers to entry to the public policy space, whether it be, an elected office or looking for the government or looking for an advocacy organization, are pretty high for some people. A lot of those positions require education. They require someone to be able to look a traditional 9-to-5,
right,
30 or more hours a week. In the case of elected officials, you have to be able to run a campaign. And there are a lot of things involved in running a campaign that can be a barrier to entry. And I do think that with the Medicaid buy-in and, the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990, and so we're starting to see kind of the first generation of people who were born post ADA
right,
come into the workforce. And I think they have expectations that, and rightfully so, that are higher than the people who were born pre-ADA. And so I do hope that as this generation moves into the workforce and becomes old enough to run for office, that we see more people with disabilities.
Yeah, that would be super exciting. I hadn't even thought about that, but that is a good point about pre-ADA and post-ADA. And you're right. I mean, those expectations do need to be higher. We need to keep ratcheting that up because there is so much value to what can be brought to the workforce and then policy work.
Absolutely. I also think the COVID-19 pandemic really shifted our idea of look and look accommodations. And, you know, I always tell people I feel really strange about talking about this because obviously the pandemic has offered lots of people suffer the loss of life. But I think it really did, for people with disabilities, change their ability to look and to show employers and, government systems and all of that, like, we can participate fully if we have the right accommodations.
It opened up opportunities in a reframed manner.
Yes.
Where it was out of the box thinking in terms of what work looked like.
Yes.
Because everybody had to do it.
Yes. And even, thinking about our state legislature, until the pandemic, they didn't have online testimony available to everyone.
Right.
Legislators had to be in person every day for every vote.
Yeah.
And now there's a remote option. And I feel like in terms of disabled people being able to hold office, that is a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I have testified online.
Yes.
I mean, it's opened up even the ability for the common human to participate in the process more.
Yes.
Yeah.
And government, frankly, whether you're a person with a disability or a parent who's looking to jobs and caring for a kid or, whatever the case may be, if you don't live in the Denver metro area.
Right.
No, it's just, I feel like made our governments and the process of making public policy a lot more inclusive.
And accessible.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Some common challenges, Hillary, that you encounter when you're advocating for disability-related policies.
Yes, they are many.
I suspect.
I think I kind of think about the challenges in terms of macro and micro. And on the macro level, we still really have the challenge of non-disabled people's, I'm just going to say it, like ableism.
Yeah.
And low expectations for our community. And, the entire history of our community is sometimes well-meaning people making really bad decisions for us.
Yeah.
That's how we got forced institutionalization and so many other things. And so on the macro level, I think we're still really fighting. I remember when we started talking about the buy-in, and I had legislators say to us, like, disabled people want to look. So like that's on the macro level, and then I think on the micro level, there's all of the usual challenges that we face trying to get a policy passed. Like, you have to have the idea, you have to get the right policy and the right words on paper, and then you have to put together a campaign that has the thing passed.
Yeah.
And I think the disability community does an amazing job of being creative thinkers in the campaign space. And it's one thing that non-disability rights organizations who partner with us often say, like, oh, you're so creative. And I'm like, yes, because our entire lives are just one string of problem solving.
Right.
Right. But, you know, you have the other micro stuff of running any campaign, combating opposition, things like that, plus the added macro challenges of people's idea of disability and what people with disabilities are capable of.
Without asking.
Without asking. Yes, without asking.
Yeah.
And even in the disability community is not a monolith. And, you know, my experience of disability is really different than, like, a wheelchair user's experience of disability, or someone who's blind or deaf is neurodiverse. And so, oftentimes I think what happens is people will be like, oh, but we asked this person, and they said this, and I'm like, wait, that's
one person's
experience, but also with one specific kind of disability.
Yeah.
You have all of this other, you know.
Yeah. We run into that all the time in the work that we do, too. It's, you know, you say you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. It does boggle the mind sometimes. It really does. So there's someone out there right now, hopefully many, many people, who really want to get more involved in policy advocacy. What would you share with them?
Well, first of all, welcome to the movement. Happy you're here. I would suggest, depending on what it is you want to change, look for organizations like CCEC, or if you want to make change at a neighborhood level, you know, a neighborhood group, it's an organization who advocates for the thing that you want to change, and get hooked up with them. Many organizations like CCEC, like the ARC chapters, offer trainings, offer opportunities to kind of get your feet wet and test it out, and offer opportunities for mentorship. So my first piece of advice is find your people.
Yeah.
And then there are a lot of different things you can do in the advocacy space. You know, we have some people who never want to testify in a hearing, and that's totally fine. But maybe they're really good at research. And so they're the research person, and they help us put the policy together on the front end and then hand it off. You don't have to do all of it. You can, but you don't have to. And so if your thing is research, or your thing is speaking in front of people, or your thing is organizing and helping get the word out, whatever it is that you're good at and you like to do, we need that skill and that talent in the movement, and we can find a place for you.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I like it. All right, so we've touched on a lot of things about this space. Anything I haven't asked you that you think is important to know that you'd want to share out?
I think the one thing that, and not to, you know, be a Debbie Downer, but I think I see a lot of people who enter the advocacy world either as a volunteer or as some kind of paid position, or frankly even an elected official, and they start off and they're super excited and they're like, we're going to change the world, and I love that energy and that optimism so much, and I never want anyone who comes in like that to lose that sense of optimism. But change doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
And sometimes you can work for years on something and still not get it passed. Or you get little incremental steps along the way, but you don't get the whole thing all at once. I really like to give the example of I one time looked at an organization that none of the things we looked on was immigration with them. And we were advocating for in-state submission for people without proper documentation. And we ran that campaign 7 years in a row before we passed it. And the 6th year we thought we had it, we had counted the votes, we had the capital filled with, 15 to 21-year-olds who were super excited that this was going to happen. And at the last minute, one person changed their vote and killed it. And it was like the most crushing night ever. I mean, there were just sobbing kids everywhere, and I wasn't much older than they were. So, I get emotional talking about it now.
Yeah.
And that was actually one of the hardest nights of my career, because I had to, answer those kids and say, I know it died, and it's 1 more year that you're waiting for the thing that you need.
Right.
So that you can unhide it and, start your life. But I promise you, this is further than we've ever gotten before, and we're going to come back next year, and I know that's so long to wait, but if you stick with it, and we should take time to learn and be angry and do accountability and all of that, but we're going to come back next year stronger, and we're going to win. And we did. And that's super hard. 7 years is a long time to wait for something that would be life-changing. But sometimes it doesn't happen all at once. And it happens in small increments. And if you're really committed to the change and the work, the hardest thing sometimes is hanging in there.
Yeah. Not losing the momentum.
Not losing the momentum, and frankly, not losing the hope.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing. I remember when Commerce was kind of here at UCA, and, there were other elect actions happening and all of that. And I remember so many people lamenting the fact that we were having to put so much energy and resources into saving something that, we had already done.
Right.
And that's really hard. Also, we saved it.
Yeah.
And, it's pretty demoralizing to be in a place where you're defending, a huge win. But sometimes that's also what happens.
Yeah, when I explain to people what systems advocacy is, I say it is the long game.
Yes.
It is. And you do have to be patient and stick in there and build your coalitions and, build support and keep pushing it forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we passed the last year to create a Office of Disability Opportunity in state government, and that is a 10-year fight.
Which seems absurd.
It does, and I kind of laugh when I say it, but we had to lay the groundwork for that. And, I mean, I would have preferred that it didn't take a decade, but it did.
Yeah.
And I think you hold on to your optimism, but also, have a little bit of realism that most likely makes change probably will happen overnight.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Our system actually isn't designed, now I'm not getting into philosophy, but, our system actually isn't designed for huge sweeping changes. And so I also try and tell people that too, is if you want huge sweeping change all at once, you're literally working against a system that is not designed for that.
Right. It's going to make it a lot harder.
Yes.
Well, Hillary, you're doing the good work out there. You are
Thank you.
fighting the good fight. It's always a privilege and a pleasure to work alongside you and partner with you in the community because you guys really make waves and changes. And we are very grateful to you for that.
And thank you so much, and thank you for having me today. This has been a really fun conversation. And
Yeah, it certainly has.
likewise, I always love working with you and the other chapters and the other Colorado, and can't wait to get back to work.
I know, exactly. Well, Hillary, thank you so much for joining us and imparting your wisdom and your experience. We certainly appreciate it. Thank all of you for joining us today. There will be more PodVods to come, so stay tuned. In the meantime, take good care.